How do you think this is going to impact proposal managers, proposal writers, so the proposal side of the house, all these people out there right now, technical writers, proposal managers, and all the BD guys also sometimes, and capture guys,
sure,
have writing responsibility, but not that much. How do you think it's going to impact?
I think there's kind of, two kind of scenario. One is people try it out and they give up very fast. And they're like, oh, it doesn't work, it's not useful, which, is not true, they should do better. And those guys, give up and put their hand in the sand and hope for the best. Those will be the first one to lose their jobs. That's a small proportion of humans, thankfully. And I see a lot of people trying and then give up too fast. So don't give up, keep trying, because we use it every day and we have no problem. But it's a 3 months kind of painful journey to get there. And a lot of people give up after a month or 2 weeks and move on. But, I think you should not do that. Then, people are embracing it. Like you said, they're going to go probably, 20, 30, and then 50x velocity, save a lot of time, maybe be able to do way more, responses than you used to. But there's a point where there's nothing to respond to anymore because you've done it all. I mean, it's just, you can't do 50x velocity and just think it's not going to have impact on jobs. So I'm afraid, think that people are going to have to reinvent themselves and try to see what else they could be doing.
Nick, how a French guy ended up over here as a high-level Fed and, starting all these companies? How was that?
That's the American dream, I guess, right? So, I started back in France. I was 15, my first company. Created 13 companies over the years. Moved to the U.S. about 12 years ago. Became a citizen about seven years ago. So it's been quite the ride. Pretty exciting to see that the government would be okay, bringing a French guy in the Pentagon to lead, software and DevSecOps and cloud security for the DoD. So it's been a lot of fun.
I can't believe it. Yes, I'm an Argentinian, and I feel a little bit of I wouldn't say a stranger. This is such a welcoming country. But it's amazing that you're French, man, just to put it plainly out there, that you're French. And, well, I guess you became a citizen before.
Yeah, I guess you have to be a U.S. citizen.
Got you. But still, that was a high-level position.
Yeah, very high level.
So you are a typical entrepreneur. Your French story is a French entrepreneur, right? That's what you were until, probably 70.
Until I got to the dark side.
The dark side, exactly. So what was your entrepreneurial activities? I mean, there's a lot of stuff.
I started coding, I was 7. I had to learn code with books in English, and I didn't speak English. So it was a lot of guessing, it was a lot of fun. But created, a few games, and I was part of the team that created PHP when I was 14, and then started, my company at 15 and a half exactly, one of the youngest, if not the youngest at the time, French entrepreneur. And then, grew that to 12 countries, hundreds of people. And then I ended up building a lot of innovation products, 187 products in about 15 years, 12 companies. And after my 12 companies, that's when I started first at DHS as the chief architect and special advisor for cyber. And then I moved to become the first chief software officer for DoD. And now I'm back on the commercial side with my latest company, Asset. So it's been back and forth, I guess. But that's pretty healthy, right? Because if you get stuck in the government world, you become part of the problem. You become slowly but surely, used to the lack of velocity. You get more complacent when it comes to speed. And there's less, urgency to get things done. And then you also have a tougher time to keep track of the tech side of things. So I think it's very healthy, for teams to go into the government, serve for maybe 3 years, and then come back to the commercial side.
So your advice would be to people to move back and forth a little bit. Is that what you're saying? Is that possible? Yeah. Federal employees...
I think it's possible. It's not easy, but it's possible.
Not easy.
I think it's very dangerous, right? I always joke that if I took a lot of the Pentagon leaders to SpaceX for more than a day, their brain would implode. They wouldn't be able to keep up with the velocity of space. I think it's a joke, but it's pretty true at the same time. And so, I think it's kind of the complacency. They kind of two bubbles. I call them the complacency bubble in the DoD, and there's the kumbaya bubble in the Silicon Valley. And I think we need to pop both of them and merge the best talent to get things done to be able to compete against China. So I think it's very scary when you see the lack of velocity and results and return on investment when it comes to how much money we're spending in DoD, which is completely insane, compared to most nations, and yet very little to show for it.
Oh, wow, you're very, very critical. Can you tell me these two bubbles that you described?
Yeah, so, the Silicon Valley is kind of the kumbaya bubble. A lot of these teams refuse to work with DoD. They are anti-military, although they don't realize, that their freedom depends on it. And that, and Silicon Valley was created, by DoD, 50 years ago or more. And then, you have the DoD side, which has so much money, such a kind of secluded, in a vacuum bubble with a lot of complacency because we've been winning for so many years. And yet, so much money is spent with very little to show for it. So I think my goal, I guess, was to pop, both bubbles and merge both of these worlds to collide and to ensure we have a chance at competing against China.
So Silicon Valley bubble and Pentagon bubble somehow should work together. Now, I would say that Silicon Valley people should be willing to work. There's a profit motivation, right? They don't care, you think?
Well, I think, the companies do, but the employees don't really care, right? They get paid regardless. And the fact is there was such a, massive brainwashing of the last two generations, and we see it now in the news every day, where effectively those kids have no clue what America is, they have no clue about history, communism, they have no clue about anything, pretty much.
Yes,
I
agree.
That those degrees, from these fancy universities are just the worst, and they don't actually learn much of anything. Even in tech, right, when you see them coming out of some of the fanciest universities, often, big companies and even startups have to, completely train these kids to understand modern technology. And they often, most universities are lagging 5 years behind when it comes to tech stuff. So you're learning obsolete technology by the time you get out. Spend a fortune on a degree that's just a piece of paperweight.
So you're saying what in Silicon Valley is an ideological thing, right? You think it's happening?
Right. Yeah, it's a culture thing. I think it's really a lack of education thing. And it's not driven based on any kind of true knowledge of much of anything. But you see, it's not, by the way, it's not the entire Silicon Valley. I would still say it's probably, close to from 25 to 40%. When I was reaching out to a lot of companies over there innovating, I would say a good 40% would not even consider, doing DoD work.
Wow.
That's a big number.
It's a little bit of free ride because they're being protected here.
Sure.
But then I don't work with
speech and everything else we give them, and then they forget about where they got it from.
Exactly, I agree with that. And then the complacency.
It's funny how immigrants don't do that because they actually felt the pain of those oppressions usually from other nations. So when they come here, they actually value America much more. It's kind of sad, right? It's kind of the typical kids born here with silver spoon, fancy universities, fancy degrees, lots of money, even and very little to show for it.
How about the complacency bubble? You're saying that, bureaucracies always spend a lot of money. So you say complacency because they haven't achieved much. In what areas do you think there's lack of achievement?
Everywhere, right? It's compared to what we're spending. If people knew like how much money is spent in some of these fields and what we get in return, I think people would not even believe it. I think not only when I started, right, I used to know very well the normal cost of doing business, right? So I would be able to estimate work and how long it should take and how much it should cost. And then I realized, wait a minute, every time I get a quote, it's 10x, higher than what I'm used to doing on the commercial side.
What's the solution for that? Because sometimes, in reality, there are the restrictions. You need the secret clearance. So that would be one thing. What's the solution for that? There's no way around it.
Well, no, I mean, definitely, but there's many ways to improve the process. Number one is, it's so tightly controlled and limited, by the way, on purpose, by the bubble to make sure that the bubble remains a vacuum, right? It's designed, it's not an accident, right? So the government designed this entire thing to make, and the leaders in the government too, right? They wanted to control that ecosystem. And so by limiting how many clearances we have and who can get them and, the entire pain of that process.
But Nicolas, you seem extremely critical. But I think my 2 cents. So you seem very, were you frustrated a lot in the Pentagon and the Air Force?
I'm sorry, say that again?
Were you very frustrated? Because I feel that you were very frustrated, or you are very frustrated with government. Are you someone who is unfrustrated?
I mean, I don't know if it's frustration, but I mean, it's just facts, right? People just don't say them, and they don't do that because they make money, working in that space, and they don't want to ruffle feathers. But the fact is, if you spend time in the space, you will see that in days. And no one, says I'm wrong. They just say you shouldn't say it to the world, and we should keep it to the family, as they call it, which is, the Pentagon. But the family is the taxpayers, not the Pentagon. And so for me, I think it's important that people understand where our tax money is being spent and what's wrong, because we've been in this self-sustained vacuum for, 50 years. And, we used to be fine, right, having the lead over China and Russia and everybody else. But now what you see is China slowly but surely taking over in many fields, including cloud, artificial intelligence, quantum compute, hypersonics. It's actually pretty scary to see, a nation be leading by 50 plus years, and over the last 20, slowly but surely being now taken over. And that complacency of like, hey, we're winning and we're always number one and we can afford to, maybe not be as aggressive as others, is now gone because of the incompetence and lack of action of the last, 50 years of leaders we had in the Pentagon.
Okay, so what you're saying is, look, I love the military, I love the Pentagon, but there's a vacuum there, is the complacency vacuum, and you're getting out there and speak in a very open way about the mistakes and the problems and the design and the whole system designed to keep the club closed, that type of a concept that you're talking about. But you believe that you have to say those things because if not, we'll get in trouble. The United States cannot be other than number one in terms of technology leadership because of these other countries that are going to take over. So what's the worst that can happen, you think?
I mean, I think it's already started to happen, right, with China taking over many, many different fields. People are now talking for the first time on now using the U.S. dollar to, as a currency for oil. And, you see, many fields, despite us pretending otherwise, being led by China. And, what's interesting in AI, for example, the U.S. is definitely leading, but what people don't realize is the fact that the U.S. government does not have access to it. So while the U.S. companies are leading in AI, the U.S. government has no access to the latest technologies. If you look at China, on the other hand, Beidou has given their latest AI technologies to the CCP. So the CCP, of course, is mandating and forcing companies to work with them. And I'm not saying that's the way to go, but I'm just saying that's a great advantage they have over us to have full access, not to mention, of course, all the IP they steal from the U.S. companies. But even if you forget about that, they've been very aggressive and eager to lead in those fields through very small set of investments. And in the meantime, you see a lot of money spent in the U.S. with very little to show for it, if you look at actual results. If people knew how many classified contracts in the billions, if not hundreds of billions, are being spent with nothing that comes out of it, I think people should be, very upset about it, right?
At least.
But it's classified or it's, dismissed because, people don't get to know about it. And that's just not okay, right? I think it's just like, looking at what happened with COVID when you see a lot of money given to companies and individuals with massive amount of fraud. People are not happy about a trillion with a T dollar spent on, on these grants that end up, being fraudulent. And I think what you end up seeing in DoD is not fraud, but it's incompetence, which is kind of as painful, particularly when you see companies getting awards and being charged, for misleading the government or not delivering capabilities, or you have multiple, cases of companies settling with the government, being charged, in court. And then still get more awards after that in a matter of weeks, right? So we keep giving money to the same wrong players, right?
Is any of the things that you do with your companies right now addressing any of these issues?
It's tough to address any of this stuff from the contractor side. I think a lot of this stuff has to be fixed on the inside. I don't think a lot of that kind of culture can be addressed by companies. Now, the benefit of what I'm talking about is really expanding drastically the access to startups and small businesses, to increase the diversity of options to the DoD. So we have actually better suited companies that have a better expertise in the field. If you look at most of the primes have a very tough time, right, building software, right? They could easily partner with the right software companies to bring these innovations. But what you end up seeing is the primes being very toxic with the companies they work with, because they have full control of the entire ecosystem and they can mandate a lot of different things, right? And you don't have a direct path to the customer, which is the government customer, right? And so having that direct line, and we did a decent job, with AppWorks and all the CIBERs and grants that we put in place, and we see some, decent results, increasing the number of startups. But now you see like something like CMMC come in, where now you're going to have drastic, cybersecurity implementations to implement before big contract awards. And for a startup, that's a massive barrier to entry. You compound that with the clearance stuff, with the time it takes to close a deal and get in front of the right people. There is no mechanism today to push a great idea to the Pentagon and the DoD as a whole and be spreading it across all the different program managers and teams across DoD. You have to find your way through that maze of people to know how to sell and how to get in front of the right people. That is just not, easy for any startup or any small business to be able to promote innovation. So I would say the entire model on how we do business, both in terms of how we acquire, capabilities with time and material instead of, actual committed outcomes, all the way to the way we handle small businesses and even CIBERs, which really has become pretty much a lottery where you get lucky if you get picked. I think it's just not working, and we need to do better than this.
Thanks for listening, and thanks to Nic. Goodbye.